Welcome back to Hear Me Out Sports. We're talking tight ends. Let's jump into it. All right, so tight ends. We're going to quickly do our week 3 review. Listen, 67.44%. That's where we're at. We're trying to get to 75. We're slowly getting there. We're seeing who is relevant and who is not. So with some of the hits, Tyler Conklin, we called it last week. He's been doing good. He continues to do good. We'll cover him more. Dallas Goedert, still consistent. He's not so much of a high ceiling, but he is consistent. So I think he's got kind of a high floor. Tyler Higbee, still goes out there and gets those points. Some misses, though. We got Cameron Brate. I think that this was a one-off thing. Not very impressed. You can see it was a close call. So he barely made it, but I'm still not going to start him. We'll get there. George Kittle. He's being used more in the blocking game for now because of some injuries to the team, but we'll talk about that later too. And Gerald Everett, I think this was a one-off game, so we're going to hope he can bounce back here in week 4. Some close calls. These, by the way, are all people we missed, and it was very close. TJ Hawkinson got a touchdown. Geoff Swaim, he got some love, and Cameron Brate, as we discussed earlier. So, listen, not the greatest percentage, but we're getting there, so bear with us. Quarterbacks, when we release that, you'll see it was a lot worse, but it was a bit unique. We'll cover that in that video. So look Thursday for that video, and we'll push that one out. Now let's jump into our first game with the Miami Dolphins versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Gesicki, I have been kind of high on him just because I think he has potential to have high-scoring games, but it's a hit-miss thing. He's a fringe for me in this one. Just because he doesn't get a lot of targets. There's so many receivers there that he can't get the focus on him. He can't get double-digit targets like some of these other tight ends. Because, I mean, when you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tyreek Hill, you kind of give it to those people. But you know what? Bengals defense, they give up a lot of points to tight ends. So he is a fringe player. If you have him on your team, I wouldn't say go out and draft another tight end. I'd say probably play him. But that depends on your outlook. Hurst, on the other hand, Dolphins allow a lot of points to tight end. Dolphins allow a lot of points to tight end. And he has an average of 6.23 points. So, listen, not bad, but he just hasn't broken the threshold. So, I'm going to bench him, especially because he also has some injury concerns. So, he's staying on the bench. That'll take us over to New Orleans, where we have the Vikings versus the Saints. Irv Smith, he's pretty high up. Some people are saying draft him, pick him up. I can stand behind that. I don't think he will have a significant game against the Saints, but we'll have to see where that goes. I think they have a really good defense. They allow less than 4 points to opposing tight ends. So that's pretty worrisome if you have a tight end playing New Orleans. But with Dalvin Cook hurt, he becomes a very good check down option, and it might move them away from the running game more so for this week at least. So he could be a fringe player as well. Hill, listen, we sat him. He sat out, so I guess that was a good call. We'll count it. Johnson, also not a great option. So he had 1 target, 0 receptions. It's just the love isn't there. I'm not trusting the quarterback there either in Jameis Winston, but we'll move on to the Cleveland Browns versus the Atlanta Falcons. We're benching both people for the Browns. They're splitting time. Bryant, 0 targets last week. Njoku, good week 3, but most catches in a single game from a Cleveland tight end since 2013. And I don't think that is repeatable right off the bat. And until I can see that it's repeatable, we're going to keep him in the bench column because of the receivers, what's going on there. He might see more love there, but I still think that this is a running team. So we're going to leave him benched for this week. If he impresses us, we'll see what next week brings. Atlanta Falcons, Kyle Pitts, for the first time, broke the threshold. Let's go. Still not too impressed, though. I got to see consistency. I think that he is very good option, and I think he is second to Drake London now. And since that connection is made, that is why I have him in the start column. He's going against the Browns. I think that he could just he led last week in targets. I think he could just be up there again. So for that reason alone, we're going to keep him in the start column For now, it's tentative. We'll see what next week shows, though. Washington Commanders versus Dallas Cowboys. I like Logan Thomas, but I'm benching Logan Thomas. I think Dallas defense is really good against tight ends. They've kind of had a pretty notable defense through these past few years. I think a little bit overrated, but listen, they're good. And he's not consistent enough. So I think that Wentz throwing 40 balls, listen, he has a chance for big target share, but he only got 3. So for that reason, we're going to bench him for now until we see what's going on there. They have a really good receiver core, so they're getting a lot of looks there. Schultz, we sat him. He did not play this last week, and so we're going to keep him sat. Even if he comes back, the injury could linger and it could limit him, and he could just be splitting time if the team decides to play it safe. Washington did well against Hawkinson in the game they played in week 2, and I think that they can do well against Schultz or Ferguson. Cooper Rush also, I don't think he's targeting him as much, so we're going to move on from that game and head over to Detroit, where we have the Seattle Seahawks and the Detroit Lions. I've benched everyone in Seahawks. I've said it before, say it again. When you have 3 tight ends who could all very well get you points on the same team, it's just too much. It's a toss of a coin. Who's going to score that touchdown pass? Because they're not all going to. I know in week 1, 2 of them did, which is impressive, but I'm going to keep him bench. I don't like that. Disley was the only one who came up with a touchdown in week 3. I don't know if that means that he's kind of the touchdown option. He's the most likely to get a touchdown. But I do also want to say real quick, though, that going against the Lions, I think tight ends typically have a good shot. Watch my other videos if you wonder why. It just has to do with the linebackers. Detroit Lions, TJ Hawkinson finally got some love. He's getting a better connection. I shouldn't say finally got some love. He's had some targets, but they finally connected, him and Goff. And with that and some lingering injuries to Swift, who could be missing a few weeks, I believe he has some shoulder injuries, and he's still coming off that ankle. And then also Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll see if he's good to go. If he is, then great. But as soon as Amon-Ra went out and then came back in with a little bit of a sprained ankle, he didn't look the same. So TJ Hawkinson, I think, would get some more target share. But you still have some other good receivers there. And Jared Goff is really spreading it around. So he's kind of a fringe start for me. Seattle, I think they just have a terrible defense. And I think they have a terrible tight end defense. Moving on, Tennessee Titans versus Indianapolis Colts. We got Geoff Swaim and Austin Hooper bench, Kylan Granson and Mo Alie-Cox bench. Tight ends just haven't been super impressive this season so far. Some of them, like Mark Andrews, has, but I'm not high on either of these teams, if we're being honest. They're not consistent. They're splitting for Swaim and Hooper. Hooper has no volume and is not consistently catching what he is receiving. Granson, on the other hand, on the other side, there's just no clear tight end one in Indianapolis. So I don't think that the target share is going to go to one or the other. I think it's just going to be split, and for that, it's hard to come up with 10-plus points. We'll skip on past that game now and head to New York, where we got the Chicago Bears versus the New York Giants. Benching Daniel Bellinger, I just don't think New York has had an impressive offense, and I think they continue to be lackluster. Cole Kmet, on the other hand, although he is a very solid target for Fields is only passing 17 times a game for this one, and for last week he only passed 11 times a game. Not enough to get good volume there. They're not built around the pass game, they're built around the run game. With Montgomery being hurt, possibly, he could see more looks, but until I see that he can break that threshold, he's benched for now. Jacksonville Jaguars versus Philadelphia Eagles. This is going to be my matchup of the week. Ingram, still without a touchdown, but still continues to impress. Last week, lackluster, but for a tight end, listen, I'll say if that was his week game, if that's his floor, then I'll take him every day of the week. And Jacksonville Jaguars, they've actually been looking good, and they've been kind of pass heavy, so I'm gonna leave it there. He had one touchdown called back in week 3, and Eagles consistently give 10-plus points to opposing tight ends. So for that reason, we are just going to keep him started. Goddard, he's at around the threshold. I think he's broken it twice, not broken it once, but he remains a good target for Hurts and on a good team. So we're keeping Goddard started. Let's go over now to Pittsburgh Steelers versus New York Jets, where we've got Tyler Conklin and Pat Freiermuth. You know what? I'm going to change it. I've decided that this is actually going to be my matchup of the week because these are both guys who I think are pretty equally matched, and I want to do an analysis on who I think is going to score more points. Conklin, he had 8 targets in week 3. Through the season, he's had 18 receptions for 140 yards and 1 touchdown. Not too bad of numbers. He's an easy check down for Joe Flacco. Now, the caveat here is that Wilson could very well be stepping in this Week 4 game, especially coming off of Flacco's horrible Week 3 game. So that will be something to look at. I am keeping him in the start column. I think he's just a solid check down option. I think he's someone who you should pick up if you haven't. Freiermuth, on the other hand, he had a rough Week 3, but still 6.1 points. First catch in the last 3 minutes, which isn't that impressive. So, yeah, they were trash points, but he's a fringe start because of just the offense in general there. Between these two, I am actually going to give it... If Flacco was still there, I'd give it to Conklin. I'm still going to give it to Conklin, but I'm less sure about that. So we're going to give it to Conklin and move on now to Baltimore, where we have the Bills versus the Ravens. Dawson Knox. There's too many other targets. That's all there is to it. He's still getting some decent looks. Tight ends against the Ravens tend to get some decent points, but I just can't trust it because of the other targets, the better targets with Stephon Diggs and some of these other guys. Baltimore Ravens, Mark Andrews, enough said, continues to impress. The last 2 weeks have been phenomenal. If you picked him up in like round 4, I think that was a solid pickup for fantasy football this year. And Lamar, he has been impressing. I've been super stoked with Lamar. We'll cover him more in our tight end or in our quarterback video, so stay tuned for that on Thursday. Now we've got the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Houston Texans. Gerald Everett coming off not a super great week 3. Wasn't catching the targets that were coming his way. He was 2 for 6, and I hope that this is his down game. I am not disappointed in his game, but there's lots of room for improvement. He has a strong rapport with Justin Herbert there, so we're going to have him started. Brown and Howard, it's a tough defense they're going against, and hasn't broken 10 points. So Howard, not a good week 2 or 3 for him. I don't think it's going to be a good week 4 either. With split tight ends, it's still hard to keep him in there. And you have some other guys there. So I'm going to bench them both. Now we've got Zach Ertz. He continues to break our threshold every single game. Again, let's hit on the scrambling quarterback to tight end relationship. If they have to make the linebackers play honest, they can do quick dumps over the top. If the linebacker decides to commit to a threat like Lamar Jackson or like Kyler Murray. And as far as tight ends go, he's only second behind Mark Andrews for targets, and that's what we like to see from our tight ends, especially in PPR leagues, which that's what our threshold is for, PPR points. If they're getting the targets, that's just more points in the bag. Carolina Panthers, Ian Thomas. Listen, Baker hasn't looked good, and the offensive scheme hasn't looked great. So for that reason, I can't trust anybody in Carolina until I see a turnaround there. We've got the Green Bay Packers now versus the Patriots. Jonas Smith and Hunter Henry. Listen, they're hit or miss. Tough Packers defense against the tight end specifically. Hasn't broken 10 points. And Mac Jones, he's hurt. So I don't know if he's going to be playing. I don't know if someone else is going to be playing. And I don't know if they're going to be able to support all these targets out there with the tight ends being anywhere near the top. I don't think so. Green Bay Packers, on the other hand, you got Robert Tonyan. Run-focused offense. I think they're going to continue to go to A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. He was close on week 3, and that was his best chance to break 10. It was a decent game, but he just didn't do enough to break the 10 points. He is now their primary tight end, but still worried about splitting time there as well. And we got the Broncos and the Raiders now with Eric Sauber and Albert O being benched. Always worried about a split. Not enough looks. Listen, target share going 2 ways in the tight end world. It's not pretty for fantasy football, so continue to have them benched. Also, the tight ends in Denver have just looked absolutely awful, and that's all there is to it. Las Vegas Raiders, Darren Waller. Denver gives up a lot of points to the tight ends. Specifically, look at the Seattle Seahawks game where 2 touchdowns went to 2 separate tight ends. So I hope to see a good bounce back for Darren Waller. He still is averaging 11.37 points per game, so I think that he easily has the potential to break our threshold and continue to do well. We got KC Chiefs versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got Travis Kelce, enough said, averaging 18 points per game. That's nuts for a tight end. He's pretty much putting up good receiver numbers. He's putting up average quarterback numbers, which is exactly what kind of carries you high. We said at the beginning of the season, if you have the capacity to draft one of these top 5 tight ends, you should have done it because there's a huge gap there between the top 5 versus everyone below them. Cameron Brate, I think it was a one-off game. He got targets because 3 receivers were out. So I don't think it's going to be repeatable. But look at the injuries there in Tampa Bay and make your decision based off that. Now we got the Rams versus the 49ers closing us out in Monday. We got Tyler Higbee as a start. I think he's consistently getting double-digit points, which is comfortable. It helps you feel good about your tight end. He's got a good role in the offense. He's got a good relationship there, so we're going to keep him started. San Francisco 49ers, George Kittle, with the injury we mentioned to Trent Williams, I think that he's going to be used a lot more in the blocking game, and he might just not get as much love at the tight end game. He still didn't play those first couple weeks, so this is kind of his preseason. He's still warming up. Maybe next week we'll see a start out of him. But with LA's solid tight end defense, I am going to bench him this time. That's it for us here. Look Thursday for our quarterback video. We've got our receiver video, should release tomorrow. And we've got our running back video, our first running back video that should be releasing this week with Chanson. Check us out. Follow, subscribe, like, do all those things below. And we will catch you next time in Week 5. Tight ends. Start 'em, sit 'em.